Three, two, one, action. Cool. How's everything been, buddy?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you again for doing this. Really appreciate it.
No
I will
problem. Where are
say
you from?
I'm in about like London based here in the UK.
Nice, nice. We
Yes.
when the Bill Murray stories played in BFI, we went to Camden and I took my picture next to the Amy Winehouse statue.
Aha, nice. So you have some memories here as well.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
loved it. I mean, it was super expensive, but I loved it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. But obviously here where this timing has worked out so nicely. Like I knew that this documentary had been out for a while. I remember when it came out, obviously being a wrestling fan and obviously seeing Mick Foley's name, you're naturally attracted to that. But the
Sure.
fact it's been 10 years now, like how, like for you, I mean, I know on like a smaller scale, like when you do little things and you're like, oh my God, it's been 5 years since that, 10 years since this documentary. I mean, how does that feel when you think about that?
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, that was my first documentary. So, and I mean, it's been 12 years since we started filming it, but 10
Mm,
years since the release. And I'm such a big fan of, 10-year anniversary Blu-rays and special. And I feel like I've owned so many versions of Clerks and Mallrats, and like different versions of these movies, like the 20th, 30th, whatever anniversaries. It feels cool to have a release, especially through Vinegar Syndrome and Enjoy the Ride Records, where it's like we got to go back, re-release it as one of those sort of things. So that's a huge honor. There's 5 extra hours of footage, but you're like, oh, I was so much younger, and then some of the Santas unfortunately have passed away, so like that's sad. But like
yeah.
it's just crazy, crazy anytime when there's a marker in which time has gone by and it doesn't feel like that amount of time.
Yeah. No, I mean, and also I mean, obviously some of the Santas you filmed with were obviously some of them were like their 70s and stuff at the time, weren't they, when
Yeah.
you were filming with them? And but you did obviously Christmas themed film, and with Christmas being obviously such a special time for everybody, obviously yours is quite a unique exploration of Christmas. How have you found, like, have you found in its own little way, it's kind of found its like place in that, like, this time of year where people kind of watch it and, it pops back up into like, people's attention?
Yeah, I mean that's like the marker for any sort of success, like finding a reason for it to be relevant at least one more time every year.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
the Bill Murray stories. We did a movie about Bill Murray, and like it's a stretch to be like, oh, well, Bill Murray's got a new movie out. Here's Bill Murray, But like with this, yeah, it's Christmas every year. So some people have told me that they make it their sort of yearly watching, which I think is amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about, with now our kids, like Mick Foley is our kid's Santa Claus. So like he'll send us
Oh.
like cards of Santa or videos of him as Santa. So it's just fun to have that constant reminder that, we did this fun thing 10 years ago. Even though we shot at 12, but still it's like it came out, and yeah, so it's fun. I was just actually talking to Santa Russell's daughter earlier today, and like in our Blu-ray, we were able to check in with like Santa Frank and Santa Russell's daughter and then Mick Foley as well, and just sort of catch in. I mean, like Mick Foley is David Arquette's Santa Claus, for his kids, so
Wow.
it's just funny. I feel very proud to say I'm responsible for the fourth face of Foley.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's pretty, yeah, that is very true.
Yeah.
Very, very true. I mean, it's crazy how much that has grown, because he's obviously, I think he also does stuff for the Rocks kids, for Edge's
Does
kids. So
he?
like, yeah, I believe so, at least from what I've seen and heard on social media and documentaries.
So funny.
Like, did you know? I mean, this is a question I had for a little later on, but I'll jump to it now. Did you know at the time of like starting this documentary that Mick was like wanted to become like a full-fledged Santa Claus? 'Cause obviously, he would do it forever as a wrestling fan. We see Saint Nick and all that kind of stuff.
Yes and no. I mean, like, when we started, we wanted to follow people who were Santa, and there was like idea, like, oh, like that would be fun to follow a gay Santa, see what that's like, and or like, and then we find a Santa Claus that legally changed his name to Santa Claus. Like, oh, we got to follow him, you know. But there was always that idea of like, well, should we do a year one sort of Santa? You know, someone who's just starting to do it, so you could see it through that perspective. And I'm a huge, huge wrestling fan, and we always, especially then, it was a little bit. It's becoming harder after doing it for so long to like sneak in a wrestler every time, you know, or at least a wrestling reference, you know. Back then it was a wrestler. So one of our producers was like, well, you know, Mick Foley is into Christmas and has like a Santa room, because like, so you would read his bios, like his biographies, and he would talk about his Christmas room and all that sort of stuff. And there's this great story about how he realized like just playing Santa at certain things was like fun for him. I mean, he never bleached his hair. He would just, you could always tell it was Mick, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Tommy Dreamer connected us to Foley, and we sort of just talked to him as an interview. Like, would you be interested in like, you know, maybe trying to do this for real? And he was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like he was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You know, he was just starting to do the touring as like the spoken word stuff.
Yeah.
So that was obviously on like top of his mind. But then once we got him to bleach his beard, he was like fully committed. You know, like it's like the way he references it is like sometimes it took him a chair shot to really remind himself that he was Cactus Jack. And so to have that pain of being a Santa, like I think woke him up to the idea like this is legit something I want to do for a while, you know? Now he does like sort of designer beard stuff, but like every year he does Santa work, and it's
Yeah.
because of that moment, you know? So after that, he would like check in with me about edits, like if he was like at Monday Night Raw, because I think he was a he was a general manager at the time, and so he would like come by my house and we'd like pull all nighters editing, and he just sort of became a producer on the film. So it was this sort of quest of like, oh yeah, that'd be great to interview him because he's a wrestler. There is this like little bit of interest there, and then it just slowly became more and more a thing, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean that's because for whatever reason, I mean, I just assumed, but I thought maybe the film was almost started with Mick, not
No.
like, yeah, like it was not Mick an addition, like he was in like a later edition. I thought it might have started with him because I saw he was a producer and things like that nature. So I thought he might
Yeah,
have had a big part of it
it
from the
really
get-go.
was like a tail end sort of thing. It was like, you know, there's like plenty of times I think he's even said this on interviews where he was like, "Do I really want to do this?" Like, you know, because like he was so busy doing the spoken word sort of comedy stuff that like he was like, "Do I want to invest?" Because like he would like drive from New York to Philly to do, because the Pierre's was the costume shop that did his costume. He said, "Do I really want to do this sort of thing?" But it all started. Me and my wife were walking through the mall around Christmas, and I was like, I wonder what life that guy goes home to, like a Santa Claus, you know? And that was sort of like the quest. And the first Santa I ran into was Santa Frank from the film. He was at a Chiller Festival, which is like a horror festival in Parsippany, New Jersey. And he had all these tattoos and all that stuff. He looked like Santa. I was like, I'm sorry, this may be weird, but are you a Santa Claus? And he gave me his card. And then I saw that there was all these Santas on Facebook. So we went down the rabbit hole of finding all these Santas on Facebook and started like interviewing them on the phone or whatever to seeing like whose story we liked. But yeah, Mick was like very like later in the process. You know, he was definitely in the beginning, and like, you know, I think we did a full Kickstarter without him. I think it's been a long time ago. But you know, once he came on, you know, he really gave it the life that it needed. And when we did a second Kickstarter later, he was very prominent in like helping us raise all the money and stuff like that. So once he was in his mind fully involved, it was no looking back. He was just Mick was the start. Like he stole the show.
Yeah. Can you imagine this film? Like, I mean, Howard's obviously he's on the poster, and obviously from a name value, obviously he was the biggest name in the film. But can you imagine this film without him now? And like, now, obviously in hindsight, it's a beautiful thing, but
Yeah, I mean, like he definitely brought. I mean, like I mean, every Santa really added their own stamp. You know, Santa Russell was like so amazing. He's probably one of my favorite stories. Santa Jim was such the heart of the film. You know, you teared up. I mean, Santa Jim is crying in the film, and when we saw the premiere, Santa Jim was next to me, and I heard him crying to him crying. So that was such a weird experience. But like, yeah, Mick, especially that last scene in the movie with Mick and his children, really brought that sort of like conclusion that we always needed. So yeah, I mean, Mick, it definitely became a much different, better film once Mick was involved.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as a wrestling fan, I'm biased, and I'll be like, of course it did.
Yeah, I mean, plus we got to have Piper in the movie,
Yes,
Lawler,
yes, yes.
Meanie, Dreamer. There's
Like,
a like a snippet of Dallas Page in the end.
mm, it's oh yeah. I mean, because the Piper thing was one of the things that struck me, and maybe for me personally, it was more emotional as a wrestling fan. But I felt
Yeah,
just seeing the two of them, and when Mick's obviously so into telling Piper about like, oh, I went to meet Santa Claus and this is what I learned, and you see the smile on Piper's face, and it's so genuine. Like I think there's a part of him that's like, oh my god, this is nuts, but also he's so actually genuinely enthused by Mick's like happiness and joy from it all. It's so
but
heartwarming and so like nice to see. It's really like it's just so touching, and obviously because Piper's no longer with us, it's
sure.
he was even extra like special to look back on.
Yeah, I mean, like Mick said it. God, I think it was like in an A&E. Like they were doing some show with A&E and WWE with like Piper, like mentioning Piper, and I think they even licensed the footage. But like he just talks about how like when he's explaining this to Piper and Piper questions it for a second, and the way his eyebrow sort of raises, Mick was like, it was like that was the moment you just tell like Piper was just priceless. Like he just knew how to sell even with just like an eyebrow raise. I
Yeah.
mean, not I'm not talking the Rock sort of eyebrow raise,
Yeah, yeah.
but like it was just like that scene with Piper. I mean, he just like says so much with so little, and it was what a huge talent.
Yeah, oh yeah, phenomenal. And one of the things that did strike, I don't know if you've ever drawn this comparison, but when I was kind of rewatching the film, one of the things that struck me was that this almost the story of these Santa Clauses and like their struggle in terms of they do it for the love of the game, and obviously there is a certain financial incentive. Like one of the I believe Russell, who was very dependent on the money to be able to move out of his place. Um, it actually drew a lot of parallels to wrestling. Specifically, like if you talk about independent wrestlers, that starving artists that doing it for the love of the game and going through all the trials and tribulations just to get to the moment of performing. Like actually, that parallel was actually very strong and actually very present there. It was, which I didn't think of at the time of watching it. I was like, actually, that's very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was by design, but I mean, for sure. I mean, one of the movies I watched a lot and like drew parallels from, and like I don't want to say stole, but
Mhm.
was like Beyond the Mat.
Yes.
And if you saw in the credits, I believe we gave Barry Blaustein a consulting producing credit. Because I mean, he was, I mean, Beyond the Mat was amazing.
Mhm.
And what the way we looked as the Santas is we're telling one story with five different perspectives. Like Santa Jim is love. Santa Mick is like the origin. Santa Frank was identity. There was all these different shades of one character through different people, and then yeah, so like could Russell have been the Jake the Snake or whatever? Beyond the Mat was just such an uh amazing movie. Yeah, Beyond the Mat was such an amazing movie that we definitely drew parallels from that. That and Confessions of a Superhero. If you ever seen that movie, Matt. I mean, when I started doing that, like I just reached out to so many different people who had made documentaries that I just loved,
Mhm.
and Confessions of a Superhero, King of Kong, Beyond the Mat. These are all movies that we drew sort of parallels with.
Yeah, I mean, I did. It's funny enough. I'm doing my master's currently in screenwriting, and we've discussed like how you draw inspiration, like actually really focusing on where our ideas come from. And it was, I mean, for me, wrestling was a big thing, and but it's also so interesting that I was subconsciously doing these things, but then we actually drew focus to, oh, this is where you're getting your ideas from, and obviously
Yeah,
in that, so, I guess you're aware of it, but I guess subconsciously you have structured a story that was almost similar to Beyond the Mat and things of that nature as well.
yeah, I mean, like, it's fun. I think when you're making a movie and you can draw upon movies that have done it in the past that you appreciated, I
Hmm.
think it's fun to have that in the back of your head to sort of like get your mind thinking about stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And we obviously you mentioned earlier that you said you started filming this in 2012. and
Yeah.
obviously, so you lived with it for 2 years before it even actually came out. Obviously, going into a documentary, there's an element of unknown. You have an idea of what you want, but obviously things unravel, and sometimes beautiful discoveries happen. When did you know? How far into the process did you know that, okay, I seriously have a film here. We've got some real good stuff here. Because I can imagine there's processes where you're still getting things, but it's not quite like it does. Maybe it doesn't quite click, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, like it was always by design that we would be filming for at least a year. Like we
Hmm.
wanted a whole calendar year of filming with these guys, so you saw what it was like to live as a Santa, not being Santa, and then your
Yeah, yeah,
actually is the game time, you know.
yeah.
Um, so it was definitely a year of filming, before we even really started editing anything. I mean, I probably tinkered throughout. I didn't like to sit on it and go, well, but like, I definitely, I had another job at the time, so like being a documentary director wasn't like my full time gig.
Hmm.
So it was like throughout, but yeah, I mean, so it was always that by design. But yeah, I mean, like seeing Santa Russell get drunk, we're like, oh, this is very funny, and then Santa Jim crying at the end of the Texas Bear Roundup. We're like, we're gonna win an Oscar, But yeah, but for sure, like when Mick asked us to film this thing at the end of his Christmas morning or Christmas Eve night, we
Yeah.
for sure knew we had an ending, So I guess it's throughout, we always knew these characters were great, so I never questioned, will this be a movie? Like it was one of those things where like we were like, all right, we got it. It's up to me to mess it up. Like,
I guess that's probably the problem you want to have, though.
yeah, yeah, because like, I had done movies prior, like I always wanted to be like a Kevin Smith, so I would mess around with scripted things or help produce people who do scripted things. But this is my first documentary ever,
Mm.
and I'm directing and editing it. So yeah, I mean, and we do have the great Morgan Spurlock behind us on that one too. So once we had some stuff, he was able to give us some notes. But um, yeah, I forget what the question was, but yeah,
No, you answered it for sure. Um,
nice.
the One of the things that struck me, which was I thought was a nice touch actually, and it kind of fit the theme of the film, the animation or the stop
Yes.
motion that you. Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I always love to when we're playing in a world to sort of dip into the thing that you're familiar with and change it up some, you know. So yeah, so with that, it was like, well, all these stories are always told through the Rack and Bass, I think I'm saying that right, animation. So yeah, so like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or like also, so it's like, oh, well, let's just play around with these themes, like let's play around with what we know as Santa and play around with it. So when Santa, these things you grew up watching, and now Santa's talking about, getting his girlfriend pregnant. It's like it's very funny to see, or like all. So it was just very funny. And once we decided that it was going to be Russell that we leaned in on, we went for it. I still have the claymation figure. I can
Oh,
see
amazing.
it's a little messy here. I just got that. Um,
Oh, brilliant.
yeah.
Nice. I mean, having dabbled in that a little bit, I know how like almost long and arduous those processes can be as well. So I commend you for sticking with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Was there anything during the process when you were filming it that really surprised you?
I'm so sorry. I'm in
Oh
the
no, you're
middle of
fine.
production, so someone was texting me something. Sorry. Go ahead.
You're all good.
Put
You're
all
good.
that out.
Was
You
there
can
any?
cut me being rude out.
Was there? This is a documentary. We capture everything, Tori. Um, was there anything that through the process that really caught you off guard? Because even just as a viewer, I mean, there were so many things. Because obviously these characters are so, and not in a disrespectful way, but almost quite absurd or quite obviously really out there. Like you don't expect this. Like for example, like the gathering of that Santa community. I mean, I didn't know that was such a thing in this world. I mean, that was something that really caught me off guard.
Yeah, I mean that was like once we heard there was an amalgamated order of real bearded Santas, and they were fighting with the fraternal order of real bearded Santas. I was like, this is crazy. And there was like all these things that, there was this like fighting and God, I wouldn't even remember what year it was, but there was some fighting many years ago prior to when we were filming, and they're like, oh, you'll never get people to talk about it. But once I started interviewing people, it was a thing that they wouldn't shut up about, So it was just
Hmm.
so funny. And then we ended up not even having it in the movie, like if you look on even the first DVD, we have this like 20-minute short film called The Santa War, which like goes into detail about this stuff. So there was a whole Santa Nick storyline that we cut out, which was hard for us to cut out because it was so good. But it was like all these stories of our Santas were like forward moving stories. And this was a story about like something that happened in the past. So it was like opposite of everything we were doing. It just kept, every time we would watch it, we just noticed it would like the brakes would hit,
Hmm.
and you're seeing all these Santas talking. They all look the same, It's like all, old white dudes with beards. So it was tough to follow if you didn't know who like Jack and who all these people were. So that was hard for us to cut out. But like the one thing that I was surprised about is like when you started hearing the rumblings of, oh, the Fraternal Order of Real Bearded Santas is upset because their president is a swinger, and you're like, what? And once we got to interview Rob Figley, who was the swinger, um, he was like the nicest person in the world,
Hmm.
and so to film to start filming a documentary about Santas, a lot of the Santas always kept wanting us to make a documentary about this fictional character, and we're like, no, no, it's about the man, the person who's doing this. And yes, we all might be flawed, but like for that minute you're Santa, you're perfect. So to
Hmm.
be with the president of the Fraternal Order of Real Bearded Santas at Ron Jeremy's club Sesso, which is a swingers club in Portland, Oregon, that would be the most weird, surrealist moment that I never thought would happen, but it's a highlight for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, watching it, I mean, it's like it felt like 90 minutes of the surreal. Like I was just like every moment, I'm like, oh, oh, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, most Christmas movies don't have the words "no nudity by the buffet." Like.
That's why yours is definitely unique. I mean, was there you mentioned it earlier, the moment with the ending that you have with Mick's kid. I believe it was Mickey who had
Mhm.
the camera. And it was because I'm not sure if you read Mick's book, the Saint Mick, his Christmas memoir.
Yeah, I mentioned
And
there 3 times, and my
I was
name's
gonna
come
say
up. Yeah,
you're very heavily featured in that, and
yeah, which is so amazing.
yeah, because that's obviously Mick says it in the documentary as well, and he elaborates even further in the book. But like you captured that moment where, because Mick said he felt it was going to be Mickey's last kind of real Christmas where he believes in Santa and that Christmas magic, shall we say? What so when you captured that and it was as perfect as it was, like what for you was that experience like? Because obviously you also use a lot of Mickey's footage that he when he's filming Santa.
Yeah, so I mean, like we are an amazingly small crew on this film. Like so small. So like I wasn't even there.
Oh,
I was in Minnetonka, Minnesota with Santa Russell. Like me and my wife were in, you know, what Minnetonka with Russell, and then like that morning he's at like the Denny's or wherever it was that he's eating by himself. That's we were there. So Derek Hunzer and Jesse Hall were there filming that one, and that would happen from time to time. Like I wasn't there when Santa Russell was drunk because I was at the Texas Bear Roundup in Texas with
mhm.
Santa Jim. Sometimes these events would happen at the same time, so we'd have to split crews. Um, so yeah, so I wasn't there for the time, but I've only heard the great stuff, and then
Yeah.
it
I
was.
guess the alternative question there could be then like when you first saw the captured footage, I guess, and the moment
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is
maybe
like
what was your
Mick wants me to edit it for his family stuff. That was the idea. It was never supposed to be for the movie. It was like
hmm,
Mick was like, "Oh, can you film this? Because I really would like to capture it." And it was the moment when like Derek ran after Santa Frank to ask him how that was, and like Santa Frank's like, "It's all over," he does the New York accent. We're like, "Oh, well, that's great." Like seeing Frank say it's all over, and he's sad about it. We're like, "Oh, that makes that's the thesis of the film," like. So you had to go through Mick's story to get to that, but it wasn't like it was a bad thing to get through. It's like it was so emotional to see
hmm,
like I mean, the real kick was seeing Mick smile. Like, like he's a performer. He's amazing on camera, but that moment he was like that was Mick. That was Michael Francis Foley, and he was just on cloud nine smiling because it just worked out. And that just showed the genuine of Christmas. Like you're seeing, yes, Mick was one of our Santas, but like now he's the fan of Santa now, So it was a really great moment seeing that smile. And he
Yeah.
looks so foolish too. It was so funny. He had like his hair like half bleached, and he's wearing some purple tie-dye shirt, So it was fun. It was a great time.
I mean, as like I said, as a wrestling fan, like seeing Mick in this film was so apropos because I was as through his various books and his characters and what he's done on WWE TV that he's loves Christmas. So seeing this as a fan of his and knowing so what a good guy he is, I've I had the pleasure of meeting him once as a fan as well for signing here in London, and you're just so happy for him that he got that because you know how much it means to him, not just as a kid but as a fan of Christmas, well for his kids, sorry, but as a fan of Christmas, everything it just like couldn't have been more perfect. And like he has the line of the film, I think, as well, which I think he says, he's talking, he says like he said he was speaking to Noel and he said he's talking about the day if he when he obviously one day when he passes, and he says, if on that day I leave the world with a giant smile on my face, it will be because I was thinking of the words, Huey, wake up, it's Santa, it's Santa.
Yeah, I mean it's emotional, and
Yeah.
like, here's a guy that was a wrestler and a champion during the Attitude Era, which is like just an amazing time to be a wrestler. The fans and the audiences were so intense and the pops were so loud.
Mm.
And now for him to do these things where he goes to charity events as Santa, and for him to feel that same sort of joy, almost even more than his time in the Attitude Era, is crazy because like he just loves. I mean, like he doesn't showcase his Santa too much. Like he just does all this charity work for like I don't know 10, well probably like 11 years now. The movie's been out for 10, but he's been doing it, and he
Mm.
just loves doing it anytime he can. Like, he does stuff for like Nora Jones kids, like, and he has like a handful of he's learned calligraphy, like he does these
Yeah.
letters, and like he makes these like jokes in it too. It's like there's no other Santa letter that's quoting Bret Hart, like so yeah, I mean he just, Mick is like a guy that has his head on straight in that like he just knows it's not the size of the audience, it's like that connection,
Mm.
and he's been able to make some strong connections as Santa.
Yeah, and 100% I agree. And as the this is maybe more of a selfish wrestling fan question, should I say? Was was Mick as advertised, like for you working with him?
Oh, he's
And
amazing. He's
yeah,
such a good guy. He's so good. Like yeah, I mean, like we, so we're huge wrestling fans, and you try not to like mark out or
yeah,
whatever, but like when you have to like dye someone's hair for like 3 hours, you have to remember what time this was too. Like, he was like thinking about coming back for like a bit and just wasn't working. So like that John Moxley sort of promos were right around that
yes,
time.
yeah.
So we're like asking him questions about that, like, you have 3 hours to kill with this guy while you're bleaching his hair, so you're sort of like trying to dabble on like just questions and stuff like that, but then you throw in like, oh, what was that? Was that weird or was that real? So yeah. So I mean, yeah, having Mick like become such a like great friend, and it being the guy from like the Hell in the Cell, like it's just crazy because like I genuinely, and I know this sounds like a cliche, like I know Mick as just like a great friend now, and then like when these like A&E documentaries come by, or like when that WWE Network or Peacock whatever had it, the Stone Cold and Mick Foley just sort of chat, and you just
Yes,
reminded like how amazing his career was, you know. And I don't you just are surprised you could even forget at a certain point, but you're just like, man, this dude is like what an amazing wrestler, especially that time, like The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H, like those four, like they just killed it, So yeah, it's amazing. He's such a great person, great soul, and I love that I'm able to like text him and be like friends with him, you know?
That's no, that's the best thing though, isn't it? The fact that you've gone beyond the wrestler. It's a genuine friend now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, we don't. It's like it's usually like Santa related when we talk,
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
but like, yeah. I mean, he's just the things he's been able to do for my children with just being Santa is like it's just so funny when you're like, that's the dude, that's
Yeah.
that's Cactus Jack, that's Mankind, that's Dude Love, and former champ, New York Times bestseller, like he's just done so many great things.
Yeah. I also just love seeing that because no one can ever reach his level, but his pure soul and just the genuine desire just to do good and be kind to people is what I love watching this kind of stuff because it's the reminder of oh, that's you need to be like that.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
it's really beautiful. And like I said, you alluded to it earlier with that moment with Mickey, and like ultimately with through all the absurdities of certain situations, this film does bring it back to like the feel good nature of what Christmas is. Whether like you believe in it or whatever religion you are, there is that undeniable wholesome quality of Christmas that's just feel good factor of bringing people together and that energy that's I think no one can deny. And it's like it's just lovely to see and everyone can appreciate that it really showcases that, particularly obviously that Mickey example being the best one. And obviously when they have the string of that montage where you see the different Santas finally do their gig and really connect and it means a lot to them. Is that the ultimate like takeaway that you are able to get to that point for the
well,
film
I
and
think
really be able
it's
to like bring that
yeah.
back?
Because like I wasn't really a big fan of Christmas when I started. It wasn't like I'm like, let's set out to make a Christmas movie. Obviously, we're doing Santa, but it was just like,
Yeah.
here's a character that we're so familiar with. And Santa Jim says it. He like, here's this guy that's in your family photos, but you have no idea who he is. And I thought to me that was the most fascinating thing. Like we hear the North Pole and all that sort of stuff, but like who's the man, who's the person, whose lap is your child sitting on is what we used to joke about. But like there was I mean, not to like say anything bad about other docs, but like there was so many Santa Claus documentaries happening around that same time. I mean, even Max just put out another one like 2 years ago. But like the ones during our time focused on telling a story of a mythical figure, and we chose to like, no, let's do a story about the guy who who like it's not caterpillars that are interesting. It's the person who's obsessed with caterpillar that's interesting, you know. So I think
Good
it was
analogy.
like yeah, it was one of those moments where like we're like, yeah, we did the right thing in my mind, where it was like you showed the story of this thing, and the payoff for Act Three when you see them be Santa is unreal, and that's sort of the magic is, like you can watch any sort of weirdo dressed like Santa Claus and like kind of have emotions on it, but if you see like everything they went through to be that, the swingers, the drunks, the name changes, the whatevers, missing your boyfriend at a Texas Bear Roundup, like you just feel for these people so much more. So that was the thing that I was like the most proud of is like, oh, like following your gut and like telling like you have to tell the story of these dudes in order to really get the story of Santa.
Yeah. No, I
It wasn't
100%
like,
agree.
oh, Coca-Cola did this and this and this story here,
Yeah.
or yeah, so
It's so funny that you weren't as big of a Christmas fan, and then you work with Mick Foley, who's the ultimate Christmas fan.
yeah. Well, dude, like when we had like a rap party, we put on Silent Night, Deadly Night, and he's like, turn this off. Like he was like so upset that we put like a Santa horror movie on, and like me and my friends are like, oh, it's funny, it's Santa, and he's like, this is disrespectful to Santa, like I mean, he wasn't waving his finger or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that, but like he was for sure like upset about it.
yeah,
But in a
and
fun way, he
yeah.
wasn't like mad.
And if I were to just to close off, and I know obviously I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I appreciate the time you've given me. Um, just final like reflections and thoughts on if you were to reflect on like the memory of making this and it's like its lasting impact, and also if you were to this kind of a double whammy, I guess, if you were to reintroduce it to someone who hasn't seen it, what would we say?
Well, I mean, the great thing is it does. I guess I run the risk of sounding like full myself, but like, it's like I feel like it is timeless, like, it is, even though these Santas, I mean, Santa Frank and Mick are the only ones that are still with us, and it's amazing for me to see them still feel very alive in this movie, and particularly like Russell, uh, the fact that if this movie keeps getting watched, his spirit will still be alive, and obviously Jim and Bob as well,
Mm,
but like to me, like I loved, because now that some of the docs we do, it's a little bit more like you're sitting down and interviewing someone and having them tell a story. Where this was so much fun just following them and so, like seeing Russell like trying to like getting lost, trying to find like a trailer park, like
mm.
so funny. Like Russell like dropping a pen and cursing is so funny to me, or Santa Bob just being who he is at Thanksgiving dinner, or Santa Jim like not knowing what like a Kindle Fire was. Like there's these like moments that we just able to find and capture personality by the amount of time we spent with these people. And that to me is like the funnest part. Like I would love to get back into doing something like that again. But they are like harder movies to make, But I mean, yeah, these little hidden gems, and we were able to spotlight these guys that maybe not would never have had a spotlight on them,
Yeah.
and now they live forever on this film, thankfully. And some people might watch it once a year, and I just love it. We're able to sort of sneak Santa Russell into some things. There was a drawing of him in Bill Murray stories. If you look at my new documentary, The House From, um, uh, there's a painting, and there's all these people looking at the Goonies house, and
Yeah.
we just painted Santa Russell cutting the lawn in the bottom, So
Nice.
we do these little things that because they trusted us, and it was amazing to work with them.
Yeah, no, that's a lovely way to end it and to remember it as well. And just a little caveat of that, you could a very small sequel potentially could be seeing Mick Foley in full-fledged Santa mode, 12 years later.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, like I just think you're gonna kill an audience when you realize it's like, oh, remember these Santas you fell in love with? They're gone, like.
That's true.
you know but
Yeah.
honestly, I've been making slowly a sequel for but just for myself, and it's just my kids seeing the Santas that we worked with, like Santa
Yeah.
Bob was our Santa for a bit, Santa Mick. I'm still after Santa Frank to be one of our Santa one year. Unfortunately, they came close to meeting Jim at South by Southwest when we did Bill Murray stories,
Yeah.
but that didn't work out. But Russell, yeah, I mean there's so well, but like, yeah, I film my kids with the Santas every year, and to me that's my sequel without like an audience of like four.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's lovely. And again, thank you so much for the time, Tommy. It's been a pleasure to talk about it. I love just diving into this stuff and all these, I guess, to get interesting spin-offs that the wrestling world has with these, various films and documentaries. And it's been wonderful to hear.
Thanks, and this is so fun. I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, it's funny that we had Sid Haig in a Santa Claus movie. Like that's so.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just there in like the thing. But yeah, I appreciate you working on this. I just literally got back from Nashville filming this MySpace doc. So like I just
Oh, nice.
and then, like, so like when some of these texts, we have a shoot coming up in a couple weeks. So it's like that was the only thing. So I wasn't trying to be rude. I just
Oh,
yeah,
no, no, you're all good. You're all good. I appreciate you making the time for me. So it's all
no
good. And
problem.
I'll let you know when this drops as well. And like I said, I can appreciate the time. And I hope more people will revisit and watch this 10 years later.
Has anyone ever said you look like that Roy Kent guy from Ted Lasso?
No, but I'll take that as a big compliment.
Yeah, it's funny.
Thank
All right,
you.
man. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, if you go to Vinegar Syndrome, I Am Santa Claus is there for the 10th anniversary. We have like 5 hours of extra footage, and it's a fun
Amazing.
watch.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put that link in the description as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
That's it.